where you can begin to see things showing up into your life just because you were thinking them. And for some of us who are very practical-minded, we think, well, that's absolutely impossible. All of these things are just coincidences. But the word coincidence is an interesting word. In mathematics, coincidence refers to angles that coincide. And in mathematics, two angles that coincide are said to be two angles that fit together perfectly. And we have taken a term that means things that fit together perfectly and assume that somehow it's all done accidentally. But in a universe in which there is an intelligence guiding everything, there are no accidents. One of my favorite ways of describing this, I did with a friend of mine years ago on some tapes. His name was Deepak Chopra. And Deepak and I were in front of an audience in London. And we all of a sudden started dialoguing about how to get strawberry ice cream. And we came up with there are 4 ways to get strawberry ice cream. And they raised in level and consciousness from the lowest to the highest. So the first way of getting strawberry ice cream is to have a thought. Everything always starts with our thoughts. And the thought is, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And then you act upon that thought. You get up, you get on your bicycle, you get into your car, you go for a walk, you go to the store, you purchase your strawberry ice cream, and you come home and you say, I've got strawberry ice cream. And we don't think that that's too amazing. But if you really look at it, it is very amazing, because that thought is invisible, it's formless, it's internal someplace. We know there's a command center in our brain, but we've never seen the commander that's in there who says, I think I'd like to have some strawberry ice cream. So it's a pretty amazing process. Have a thought and then act upon it. The second way to get strawberry ice cream is to have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream, and you stay right where you are. And you send one of your children off to get the strawberry ice cream. And this is a higher level of consciousness, because here you are just sitting there having a thought, and you just express a word, and someone else goes off, gets the strawberry ice cream, brings it back to you, and you think, this isn't too bad a way of doing it. The third way we talked about on stage was the more intriguing way. And the third way to get strawberry ice cream is to have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And then someone walks by and they say to you, excuse me, is this your strawberry ice cream? And when that happens, you go, whoa, booga, booga, booga. And you call everybody that you know and you tell them, you can't believe what happened today. I was just thinking about having some strawberry ice cream, and a stranger just walked by, and there it was, and he handed it to me. This is what Jung called synchronicity. And this idea that you have a thought. Perhaps it's a thought about a sister that you haven't talked to in 5 years, and she lives on the other side of the country, and you can't get her out of your mind. And that thought represents an energy. And that energy says, gee, I'd really like to talk to my sister, but I haven't talked to her in a long time. And all of a sudden the telephone rings, and there's a feeling in here. And that feeling says, gee, I bet you that's my sister. And you pick it up, and sure enough, that's her. That's her calling you. And everybody that's out there has these kinds of experiences. You have a thought about something. I can remember one time having a thought about getting my screen doors fixed. And I had been given a hard time at home about get your screen doors fixed. And I just hate fixing screen doors. And I was driving down the freeway, and I looked to my left, and passing me was a truck that said, we will fix your screen doors. And I thought, this is synchronicity in work. And I followed that truck, and I got his number, and I called him, and I had the screen doors fixed before I even got home that evening through a telephone call. And we often think these kinds of things that we call synchronicity, or we call sort of a serendipity or collaboration with fate, that they're accidental. But there's no accidents in this universe. Every thought that you have is a thought that is an energy. And that energy, when it is sent out, connects to something else. And everything in this universe is connected. Every tree that you see in this scene right here, every single bug that's out there, all of the thoughts that you have, all of the human beings. There's a philosophy that says that a butterfly flows his wings in New York, that it affects the winds in Tokyo, all around the world. So that's synchronicity. But there's a fourth way of getting strawberry ice cream, And that's the way that I dream about and think about. It's called unity consciousness. And this is where you have a thought, gee, I'd really like to have some strawberry ice cream. And you manifest it. In the scriptures, this is called the gift of fish and loaves, that you live at such a high level of consciousness that whatever it is you place your attention on shows up, and you become the creator or the co-creator of your life. But those are the 4 ways of getting strawberry ice cream. The first is quite easy. You have a thought, and you go out and get it. The second is you have a thought, and someone else does it for you. That third one, called synchronicity, that's one in which you can begin to see that when you have a thought, you have the power to attract into your life what you're thinking about, even though you may not be consciously aware of it. You can literally negotiate the presence of what you place your attention on. And ultimately, even the least among you can do all that I have done and even greater things. And this means that we all have that capacity to have the gift of fish and loaves in our lives, or to manifest what we would like. Basically, there are 3 levels of consciousness that I like to speak about. They go from low to high. The lowest level of consciousness is what I call ego consciousness. And it's the time when we believe that who we are is our bodies and what we can do and what we have and what other people think of us. We essentially believe we're separate from everyone else, and we're separate from what we would like to attract into our life. We're separate from God. And we go through our lives sort of believing that we are so special and so important, more so than others, and in competition with others. And then there's a level of consciousness that I call group consciousness. And this may be higher than ego consciousness, but it still causes a lot of problems. This is where we begin to identify ourselves in terms of the groups we belong to. I'm an American, you're a Canadian. I am male, you are female. I'm Republican, you are Democrat. I am Muslim, you are Catholic, and on they go. And ultimately, we create an enormous amount of conflicts and ultimately wars over this group identification. But there's a third level of consciousness, is the one that I've always aspired to and try to teach people to go to, and that's called mystical consciousness, or unity consciousness, or even God consciousness. And this consciousness is one in which we begin to see ourselves not as separate from each other, but as connected to each other. And when we see another human being, we see the unfolding of spirit rather than their appearance, what color they are, what shape their eyes may be, what their belief systems or cultures they belong to. That all gets shifted into seeing the connection between all of us. And my friend Ram Dass, many, many years ago, tells a wonderful story that illustrates how difficult it is for some people to understand this level of consciousness. And he tells a story of a shepherd. And the shepherd was tending to his flock. And a person from this ego consciousness from another part of the world approached him. And he said to the shepherd, he said, would you mind if I ask you a few questions about your sheep? And the shepherd said, why, certainly. He said, well, tell me, he said, how far would you say your sheep graze or walk in a given day? And the shepherd said, well, I can't answer that question unless you tell me which ones you're speaking about, the white ones or the black ones. Well, this man said, the white ones. He said, well, the white ones walk 4 miles every single day. We've measured that. He said, that's amazing. And he said, what about the black ones? He said, well, the black ones also walk 4 miles. Well, he was a little perplexed by that, but he said, well, tell me this. He said, tell me, how much food would you say your sheep would eat in a given day? And the shepherd again said, well, I can't answer your question unless you tell me, are you speaking about the white ones or the black ones? He said, well, tell me about the white ones. He said, well, the white ones eat exactly 3.5 pounds of grass every single day. We've measured that. He said, really? He said, well, what about the black ones? And he said, well, they eat 3.5 pounds as well. Well, the man just got a little more frustrated. Finally, he said to him, he said, well, in the springtime, at shearing time, he said, how much wool would you say your sheep give? And the man said, which are you speaking about? He said, well, the white ones. And he said, well, we've measured that. He said, the white ones give 6 pounds of wool every spring at shearing time. And he said, well, what about the black ones? He said, well, the black ones give 6 pounds also. Finally, the man was beside himself. He just couldn't understand this. And he said to him, I don't understand this. Every time I ask you a question about your sheep, you ask me to divide them into the white ones and into the black ones, and then you tell me they're exactly the same. He said, why would you do that? He said, that may be a bit confusing to you. He said, let me explain. He said, you see all of those sheep out there? He said, yeah. He said, you see the white ones? He said, yeah. He said, I see the white ones. He said, well, the white ones are mine. I was given them, I raised them, and they're all mine. I own all of those sheep. Oh, he said, I understand. And he said, what about the black ones? He said, well, I own them too. And that was the story. And it was the story that I've always been amused by. I remember when I called one of my friends, and he laughed out loud at that story, Deepak Chopra. He said it got to him. The idea was that we, and from ego consciousness and group consciousness, need to divide everything into colors and into appearances. But there are some of us who understand that those are just artificial divisions and dichotomies. And in fact, everything in the universe is all sharing the same intelligence. We're all one, even though we try so hard to divide them up.